I'm going to go over here and turn the light on. Okay, that might help because it's a little bit dark in here, I think. I can't see me on here, but I could tell it was a little bit dark. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and work on lesson 89 this morning in Heritage Studies. So this that you see on the screen was page 118 that we had finished last week, I think, last Friday, whatever day that it was. And this was the top of the page. Remember how we filled out the information about the three leaders of three of the prominent countries during World War II. And then we filled out the middle part, which was the true and false, and then the communist and the it was Chiang Kai-shek or Mao Zedong that we were talking about, the Chinese and the Japanese leaders. Okay, so today we're going to review, but we're going to be in your reader book, we're going to be on page 264. So if you'd pause it right quick and get out 264. Okay, before we start, I'm going to ask you a couple of review questions. Now, in a minute, the answer is going to pop up right here, but I want you to say the answer, if you can, before I show the answer myself, okay? All right, so which dictator threatened his own people inside the USSR? Do you remember who that was? Joseph Stalin. Remember, Joseph Stalin was the dictator of the USSR. What did Italy's dictator Benito Mussolini tell the Italians that he would make their nation? Remember what he said he was going to make their nation? He said he was going to make it the center of a new Roman Empire. Who was Germany's Führer? I don't know how you pronounce that. That's a German word. But he was basically Germany's dictator. What was his name? Adolf Hitler was his name. Bad dude. And which country attacked and conquered parts of China? Do you remember who attacked China and conquered parts of it? Japan. Because remember, during World War II, Japan was some bad dudes. All right, let's look at page 264. At the very top, you're going to see a map. It says pre-war. That means before the war. Pre means before. Expansion. So before the war, expansion. Now, over in the corner of the map, the right-hand corner, you're going to see a little tiny map key, and it shows what those colors stand for. There's two colors. Well, there's three colors. The red is the Axis powers, and that would include the USSR, Germany, and Italy. Now, those were basically our enemies. And then the Axis control, and where they controlled were all of the kind of greenish or the brownish colors. Czechoslovakia, Austria, and whatever that little section is down there just north of Albania. So they were starting to control a lot of things. All right, so let's look on 264. Now I'm going to begin to read. We're going to read to page 267. Well, actually, we'll kind of stop a little bit here and there, but I need you to follow along, okay? Here we go. So even before World War II officially began, many countries were fighting. So let's go ahead and look at rather than read, let's do this. Let's look at some of our slides, because I think that I put most everything on the slides. So, well, let's go ahead and read a little bit. So, before World War II officially began, many countries were fighting. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, and 2 years later, Japan invaded China. In 1938, Germany took over Austria. The two countries did not fight, but many Austrians wanted their country to be free. Then in 1938 and 1939, even more trouble occurred. First, Adolf Hitler demanded that Germans in Czechoslovakia be allowed to join Germany. France and Great Britain had promised to help Czechoslovakia. Instead, they let Hitler take pieces of the country. But that was not enough for old Mr. Hitler. In March 1939, he took over the entire country. Hitler then wanted to conquer Poland, but the USSR to Poland's east also wanted some of the country. Now, even though Hitler and Stalin didn't really like each other, they did make an agreement. They would each take half of Poland. Americans watched Europe edge closer and closer to another world war. Most Americans hoped that their country would not need to get involved. So, this right up here, before the war started, okay, now, so it hasn't actually started yet. There was already some fighting. Italy invaded Ethiopia. Japan invaded China. Germany took over Austria. Hitler took pieces of Czechoslovakia and took over the entire country later. Hitler wanted Poland and USSR wanted Poland. And even though these two guys, this is Stalin and this is Hitler, even though they didn't like each other, they did make an agreement that each one of them would take a piece of Poland, half of it. And the Americans, we were just hoping, look, we were just like, y'all, just keep the fighting over there. Don't mess with us. We don't want another war. Y'all just be good little boys and girls over there in Europe. So Americans did not want the United States to get into the war. Now, let's look at page 265. You're going to see an airplane there on the side, kind of on its side. So this is how the war started, okay? And these words that you're going to see up here on the screen, words to know, these are some words that I'm fixing to tell you kind of what we're going to read what they mean. So the democracies in Europe knew war was coming. France and Great Britain warned Hitler he must not attack Poland. And they told him that they would fight if he did, but Hitler had already made them back down before the takeover of Czechoslovakia. He believed his military could beat them. Hitler had many soldiers. The German Air Force, or the Luftwaffe was the German Air Force, had new well-built planes, and German tanks could move very quickly. Remember back in World War II, all of these things were brand new. Planes were very brand new. Tanks, very brand new. But now in World War II, they've got bigger and better ones. On September 1st, 1939, German forces attacked Poland. Great Britain and France gave Hitler 1 day to withdraw. He did not. So September 3rd, France and Great Britain declared war on Germany. So World War II had begun. France and Great Britain could do very little to help Poland. The USSR invaded Poland on September 17th, and by the end of the month, Poland surrendered. They had Germans coming from this way, Russians coming from this way, and a little tiny bit of Great Britain and France were saying, we're going to try to help you, but they just couldn't do it. So now, France and Great Britain could do very little, so that's why Poland surrendered. They just had it coming from both sides. This fast-moving attack became known as the Blitzkrieg, right here. A lightning war. It came on fast like lightning. So the fast-moving attack was known as the Blitzkrieg because it came on fast like a bolt of lightning. Germany did little for the rest of the winter because of bad weather. But in the spring of 1940, the Germans began to move again. Very quickly, Germany conquered Denmark and Norway. In early May, Germany attacked Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and France. By the end of May, those smaller countries were all conquered. And on June 22nd, France surrendered. Italy joined Germany and attacked countries in southeastern Europe. Only Great Britain kept fighting in Europe to stop Hitler. Now in Asia, Japan conquered its harsh war against China. In September of 1940, the Japanese, German, and Italian empires entered into a three-way alliance. It was called the Axis powers. Remember what an alliance is? A group of people getting together. They called themselves the Axis powers. Japan would get to take over the European colonial empires in Asia. Germany and Italy would split the European and African lands. No country seemed able to stop these Axis powers. Now, what you see on the screen is the cause of America joining in the war. This is a very important date to many people. To some people, they don't even know what it is. We should always remember Pearl Harbor. It's kind of like, you probably don't remember, but in 2001, attackers attacked America. They hijackers attacked America and brought down the Twin Towers. That's a day, September the 11th is a day that most people will never forget if you were old enough to remember. Just like December 7th, 1941. I wasn't born yet. My parents weren't even born yet, but my grandparents were. And so they remember that day. Let's look at page 266 where it says the United States enters. Now, look at the map at the bottom. Now, remember, Japan and what was it? Japan, Germany, and Italy joined forces. They made an alliance with each other. Basically, they were going to let Japan take over Asia, and then Germany and Italy were going to take over all of Europe and part of North Africa. Okay, so they had this big plan. They were going to basically take over the world, or half of the world. So this map at the bottom shows how Japan was trying to go out and make its empire bigger. So you'll see where it says Japanese expansion, those arrows that go out. See how little Japan is? That little red island right there, they're just a tiny little, what are they even doing? They were trying to take over, and they're just a little bitty old place. Now, let's read about America entering in the war. As war continued across Europe and Asia, Americans feared that the fighting would spread. Although few wanted to fight, most Americans began taking sides. A few wanted the Germans to win. They thought Hitler would improve Europe. Most, however, didn't like Hitler. They wanted Great Britain to win. Winston Churchill was now the British Prime Minister. He was a good friend of President Franklin Roosevelt. Although not officially in the war, America began to help Great Britain. America sent ships to England. In exchange, the British allowed the United States to use British military bases. Americans were sympathetic with England when Hitler bombed Britain. They respected the heroism of the British people who refused to surrender. Some Americans went to help Britain. Americans also sympathized with the Chinese. Some Americans even offered to help them fight against Japan. President Roosevelt worked to stop Japan from getting supplies like gasoline and rubber. The United States refused to trade with Japan. So the Japanese decided to get the supplies despite American opposition. They planned a surprise attack on the United States. The American Pacific Fleet sat at anchor in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and on December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese naval and air forces attacked Pearl Harbor. In the surprise attack, many Americans died. The next day, Congress declared war on Japan, and the United States was now part of World War II. Britain and the other nations fighting the Axis powers welcomed the United States into their alliance. These countries were called the Allies. Okay, so it was the event of the bombing of Pearl Harbor that caused Americans to enter into the war. Okay, so let's look at our work text pages. Now you have one work text page that you're going to do for a grade, and then we have one that we're going to look at ourselves. Okay, so look at page 120. Go ahead and pause it as you open your work text to page 120. Okay, the very top it says Britain stands alone. So we're going to read this little section and then we're going to answer these questions. But here's the thing. You don't have to write these down because this is not really a page that's going to help you in your studies. This is just a page we're going to kind of talk about. It's going to kind of lead our discussion. Okay? So let's read together. Great Britain and France declared war on Germany September 3rd, 1939. After France fell to the Germans, Britain stood alone. Hitler's Luftwaffe planned to gain control of the skies by wiping out the British Royal Air Force in what the Germans called Operation Sea Lion. Next, the Luftwaffe would bomb port cities and beaches in order to finally land troops by water on British soil. But the RAF, the Royal Air Force, shot down many German planes. Hitler ordered bombing raids on British cities, including London. The attack started on July in July 1940 and lasted for a year. The RAF fought courageously to protect Britain from the bombings. British pilots made as many as 5 sorties, or battle flights, a day to defend their homeland. Their efforts prevented the fall of Britain. Winston Churchill, the new prime minister, said of the RAF, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many or so few." So, the first question is, why did Great Britain have to stand alone against the Germans? Because France was helping, then what happened? Germany took over France, so they couldn't help anymore. So Great Britain was trying to fight this big bully all by himself, all by themselves. What 3 things did Hitler's Luftwaffe want to accomplish through Operation Sea Lion? Remember, they wanted to gain control of the skies around, remember, and wipe out the Royal Air Force. They wanted to bomb some of the cities and the ports and the beaches, you know, right there. And then they wanted to land their troops there so they could go in on British soil. So they were trying everything in their power to take over Great Britain. When did the Germans begin Operation Sea Lion and how long did it last? They started it in 1940 and it lasted for 1 year. Explain how the RAF prevented the fall of Britain. What they do to some of the German planes. They shot them down, didn't they? They shot them down. They fought to keep Britain from being bombed. And the British Royal Air Force were sending out at least 5 what they call sorties or battle flights a day to defend them. So Winston Churchill said, "Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few." And that means basically that the British people, which was a lot, owed their lives to the very few British Royal Air Force pilots. So, in other words, so few men helped to save so many people. And so that's what he meant by saying that, is never in history has so many people been needing to thank so few for saving their lives. So that's pretty good. And like I said, you didn't have to write anything on that page. It was just kind of a talk through page. It's not going to be anything on your test or anything like that. It was just I wanted to talk through it. Let's go ahead and look at page 119, work text 119. Now, you are going to do this page yourself for a grade. Okay, you're going to use the key up here in the top left corner. This is a map during the war in Europe, so pay close attention to the countries. Okay, so 1 through 9, you're going to list the names of the countries that are labeled as part of the Axis powers or Axis controlled. Use the key up there. And then 10 and 11, list the names of the countries that are labeled as part of the Allies or Allied control. There's only 2. And then 12 through 17, there's 6 of those. List names of the countries that are labeled as neutral or didn't choose sides. So you're just using the map key to answer those, okay? So this page, I think, is worth 17 points. It should be super duper easy, okay? All right, I guess that will be all for today.